on a big walking hill that turned this way, put 250 pounds of aluminum in it and come out with 13 pounds and a pile of chips to fill the room, you know. But yeah, that's what I was doing. And I was working with a really first-class machinist. I was just an apprentice to him. And I did that for quite a while. And then that was while Madden and I were racing together. And he said, Joe Hunt is looking for somebody. Now, Joe Hunt's shop was down the block from where we ran the dragster with Madden, which was Charlie Canina's place on Slauson and Normandy. Around the corner was Wedge Engineering, which is Carmen Paisano. They made bell housings, shatterproof bell housings. Donovan was over in Inglewood, not very far off. And the fact that Joe Hunt was in the racing business and was willing to put me to work as a machinist, I get to meet all those people that came in that place. So I went to work down there. I mean, it didn't change anything. It was like $1.53 an hour or something, you know. But I got to meet George Bignotti and James Warren. He came in complaining about his magneto. Everybody came in complaining about their magneto, especially the Indy guys. Because Joe had one guy that did the Indy mags. And they were good mags, but they couldn't stand the vibration on those Offenhausers. So you put the mag on it, motor would run good, but it would eventually vibrate itself to pieces and quit running. Mm. So we were in the process of building a magneto to compete with the Schieffer, which had come out and was stronger, and Cirillo was coming down the pipe with a couple of his modified mags. So Joe got this down this box of Wyco magnetos that he had that were farm machinery magnetos, and we started machining the cases to use on the motor, and he hopped it up with coils and magnets and, you know, made it a competitor, but it was a piece of junk. It was really awful. And but that's what the job was to go down and produce those cases and carve them up from big pieces into little pieces. And I worked down there, I don't know, 6 months or so, and then Mary Hunt just got to be insufferable. Nobody could stand her, but me being outspoken, it made it crazy. Because she didn't want to hear anything I had to say about it. But Don Zig worked down there, and Mike Fair kind of ran the place. And it was neat. It was, again, a case of camaraderie with race car guys that drifted in and out of the place. And Joe had a pile of Indy cars. He would buy last year's Indy car and then go back there with a mid-pack driver, put him in last year's car and make money. Because it would qualify. He would qualify 28th or something like that. And the payout was 50 grand. Well, he didn't have 50 grand in the car. You know, because the payout money for Indianapolis is really spectacular. And he would run maybe that race and Phoenix and Hanford when it was pavement. And that was it. And he'd end up with a pile of Indy cars that he don't have any money in, and he put all that money in his pocket. It was amazing the way he operated. Kind of like Jim Dunn does with drag racing. Jim Dunn now he has sponsors, but Dunn has done all of that stuff with the sole intention of making a living at it. And I don't know that if he worked so hard that he wouldn't have made that much money if he was doing something else. Certainly not a fireman. He was a fireman for a long time before he would, but he was a professional drag racer and a fireman at the same time. So was Hugh Tucker. But the effort that it takes to make money doing this thing is what essentially put me outside of the drag racing business. The next move after this was with Kegel, and that's when we put the front mount motor in the car. This motor came right out of Herder's Streamliner. It had run 313 or 331, something like that.
At Bonneville.
At Bonneville, in the Streamliner.
And which Kegel is this?
Clark.
Clark Kegel.
Now, Clark and I had been friends. I met him when I first came out through Lefty, and one of the people he introduced me to. And we hit it off really early because he liked to banter. And I was pretty good at that. And he and I had some good conversations, and I would go over to his house. He had a beautiful daughter. Her name was Debbie, and she was about 15. But she stopped traffic, man. Carl Schieffer ended up chasing her around for a long time, and I think she lives up in Santa Barbara now. Anyway, I quit when we wore out Kegel's parts. I decided to quit drag racing, and I went to work for Woody had run out of work, so I went to work for Yackel Plymouth as an assistant used car manager, working for Vince Rossi Rapp and Maldonado, and working on the Yackel car on the weekends, and sometimes a lot of times at night and weekends we'd go racing. And that was the time of my life, man. With being with Baney and all that bunch, I mean, it was spectacular. The stuff that went on, and the stories, and Lou liked to tell stories, and I liked to listen to them. So I sucked them all in. The other guys all heard them; they didn't want anything. But he'd sit there and talk to me for hours. And Garrison was working on the. He was the mechanic of record.
John Garrison.
Yeah, when we first started the Yackel car, Ward was the ramrod. Ward made the transition from the car that Jack got hurt in, Jack Chrisman got hurt in. They rebuilt it, put a body on it, and it was Baney, Lesa, Rapp, and Rossi.
Jim Ward driving?
Jim Ward drove it. And then they bought Woody's cars were tearing everybody up, so they bought a Woody car. And I had the good fortune of assembling that car with Ward at Woody's. And it was that era that we invented, or everybody invented, the Zoomy header. And the word Zoomy came from Ward because he said everything was Zoomy. He referred to things as, hey, that's really Zoomy. So that's how the name got to be. But
Interesting.
He put the package together. He went out and got the tubes, and Paul welded them up, and we were going to run them on the Charger that weekend.
Paul Sutherland.
Paul Sutherland. And he was partners with Ed Peters. And they had Peters' dreaded night motor in the Charger, and they didn't get it finished. So we were finishing up Cannon's car along with the Yackel Plymouth car. They happened almost simultaneously, which was the Hustler 5, and went to Long Beach and ran 200 with it, and then went to Sacramento on Sunday and ran 200 with it. So it was all really legitimate. But he had run 199.88 in several different places, so running 200, the fact that he ran the number was like when Bernstein ran 300. It was right after they ran lots and lots of 299s, you know. So the Yackel car, I got to assemble the Yackel car as it got finished. Cruzy did the body on that, copying the Canon Hustler 5 body that Willie Sutton made. And that's how they got to be a similar shape. And Cannon was running at that point with Zuccio. Zuccio was making the motors. Amos Satterley worked for Cannon and was following Davy's instructions as to how to run the motor. You didn't make a lot of changes in those days. There wasn't a lot of nitro, 50, 60%. So you didn't waste a lot of parts. Only the guys that didn't know what they were doing were throwing the parts on the ground. Everybody else was going through, maybe melting a piston here and there, or bending up push rods, common bending up push rods, because it was before the Smith brothers came along, and the stock push rods with the little adjusting end, they'd fold up like pretzels. It was that was the weak link in the valve train, especially when you started running the valve spring pressure up to keep the blower on it. So Yackel, ran the Yackel car, went to Sacramento, and fired it up. Sounded good. Ran 223 first run. Got back, drained the oil, and it had water in the oil.
And 223, we just were at 200, so this is much.
Oh no, yeah, the speeds picked up. I'm sorry, 213.
Here we go.
Speeds picked up very rapidly that year.
And this would have been 64?
65.
65.
65 now?
60, late 64. Late 64 is when the headers came out.
Yep.
65 was when the Yackel Plymouth car started running. By the time
Okay.
we got to Garrison, that's when I entered the picture. Prior to that, Ward ran it, and I was only a tire wiper. I didn't have anything to do with it. But when he hired Garrison,
John Garrison.
and we moved into the back of Waldo Hirschfield's speed shop on Alondra and Garfield. He had the back shop. We had a back shop. It was like a garage, a two-car garage, and Leffler was doing the engine work for Waldo, and Bainey rented that. Rossi rented the garage, and we started working out of there. Prior to that, they worked at Ward's house, and I didn't have anything to do with the car then, other than when we go to the races, I'd go with them. And so when Garrison started running the motor, by that time, when we went to Sacramento, we had fast time at 213, and water in the oil, and it turns out that there was a hex bolt left in the pan that the crank picked up and spit it through the crankcase into the water jacket. I was the one that took the motor apart. When we got it back, Garrison went off chasing something, and I took it out and stripped it down to all the parts, and I had it upside down on the bench waiting for him. Of course, I gave him a batch of stuff about it. I said, "What you forgot that when you built this motor, Ace, you yeah." And so, and the bolt was still stuck in the cast iron. I didn't remove it. And we started running on a regular basis. We ran Pomona, went down to Carlsbad, and that's when you were in the picture there. Mm-hmm. Kegel still had my car, and we'd go occasionally to run. Didn't run very often because he'd go through blowers like pork through a duck, and so he didn't get to race it very often. But we went down to Carlsbad, and that's those pictures where the blower spread all over the. I'll show you those pictures. There it is.
And Kegel still had the front mount blower?
Yep.
And that's where he was going through the blower from?
We broke 11 blowers on the front of that thing. 792, 184. This is Carlsbad, December 13th, 1964.
So Carlsbad hadn't been open that long.
No, it had just started.
Yeah.
We went down there, and this is Yates in it.
Okay.
And it hauled ass. And it ran off the end, and it was into a sand trap. And the motor plate hung down about that far below the chassis, because it was a new motor plate, and I hadn't sawed it off yet. And that motor plate brought him to a stop. He was all black and blue from the belt.
Oh yeah.
When he got in the sand?
when he hit the sand trap. Yeah.